All right, everyone, this is being recorded for posterity. So if you need to jump off at any point in this and you want to see the rest of the presentation, it will be available on the Trusted Advisor website in a couple of weeks once we edit out all the junk at the beginning and junk at the end. For posterity, if everyone would like to put their contact information in the chat, we'll get to know who is here, because there are some people that are guests to the presentation today. And to give you a little bit of information, this is a monthly educational presentation or conversation sponsored by Trusted Advisor Network, which is an inclusive regional consortium of professionals who are dedicated to collaborative networking and who serve business owners and C-suite executives. Our mission is to help both the business community and our members thrive. And as a member of TAN, you can get and give referrals to your business, collaborate with other professionals, and find resources. And I will put a link to the organization's website in the chat as well, so that if you have any questions, concerns, you want to see when the next events and educational presentations are, you can do that at the Trusted Advisor website. Many members are here today. Many Trusted Advisor members are here today. Any one of them could answer questions about the organization. And if you're a guest, we encourage you to come to, quote, regular meetings where we learn to be better networkers and share referrals and information. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our presenter today. His name is Drew Tulchin. He is the president of New Mexico Angels and has been active with New Mexico startups since Hector was a pup, right, Drew? Drew was the first CFO for Meow Wolf. You may have heard of that little organization based in Santa Fe. And he has contributed to 100+ business plans and dozens of startups, generating over $300 million in investment and thousands of jobs. Today, he's going to be talking about angel investing in New Mexico and what that is and how it can help advance the New Mexico business ecosystem for a better community. Drew, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much, and appreciate Kelly, the many volunteers of TAN, and TAN as a partner for us. I'm going to share my screen here, and sometimes I'm slow, so give me a second and give me a little bit of positive encouragement here when I get it going. Sarah, how's that going? And then let me do the presentation slideshow. From the beginning. Okay. How's that look, everybody?
Good.
Okay, great. So, we're going to do the proverbial brown bag lunch 50-minute hour. And this is your time. You're the experts. So what I thought that I would do is I would share a little bit about my perspective, both personally as an angel investor, someone who is writing checks to invest in New Mexico-based high growth and early stage companies, as well as the idea of an angel ecosystem. And New Mexico Angels and TAN have a number of members in common. Priscilla Dakin is here on the call. She's on our board. Thank you very much, Priscilla. John Rice, many of you might know, and there are a few others. And we've had a couple of previous efforts where we've had collaboration. And, I want to see you be successful. Many of you are small companies as well, small businesses. And I also want to see you be able to get more business and you be able to help as we build our network. So my motivation here is for you to be able to learn something, for my be able to get some feedback from you, and for us to have a common interest. And then, as I mentioned, I was in a nice quiet spot in this hotel, but of course it got crowded with this conference. So I then went out to the street. So for the recorded posterity, we may get some trucks to have their small business development part of this presentation. And if it gets really bad, I'll mute. And if we could just, maybe we'll have a couple of backup questions that we can have conversation with if I, as a leader, can't have good sound quality. So my apologies for this less than ideal situation. To get us started, let me go to the next slide here. 1 second, I've got a little cursor.
And while you're doing that, Drew, if you have questions at any time, Drew welcomes a collaborative conversation sort of event today. But if you want to put your questions in the chat as well, we can then make sure that those get answered.
And in fact, I'd like a couple people to be willing to help me with kind of questions that you come to the room with, or things that you'd like to make sure you get out of a session on angeldom, angel community. So could I get a couple of brave people to unmute, or if we need to technically unmute them, so we can get a couple moments. And my screen is frozen, so I'm going to do that while we're hearing a couple of people's interests here.
Anyone want to volunteer why they're here today to learn about New Mexico angels and angel investing?
I think this is Priscilla. I think it would be good for us to be able to learn the various ways of participating with the angels, because there are a number of ways, and for people to have that understanding would be good.
Great, thank you, Priscilla. How about one more brave soul, or if you want to type it in the chat there, that someone wants to just unmute and give me a good comment.
Yeah, my name's Mike. I'm just a local professional, and I've invested in one startup and saw the New Mexico Angels is here in New Mexico, and I really like the idea of investing in New Mexico companies, and so that's why I decided to take part.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's excellent. And I think a lot of us are investing with the 3 T's: time, treasure, talent. Not all of us might be accredited investors, and I'll get to defining that in a second. But there are ways that we are invested and committed. And I think one of the benefits of New Mexico is that we are collegial that way. So here's our agenda. 1 and 2, the New Mexico Angels, Tan, who's here. I'll go through New Mexico Angels as an organization. I'll go through kind of Angel 101, which is what does it mean to be an angel investor? And then we'll finish up with the question and answer community conversation about how we make 1 + 1 = 3. Or the other things that the rainforest says is a rainforest in the desert. We want rising tide. We want to lift all ships. We want more boats on the water. We want bigger containers. So that's what we're looking for here. So the mission of the organization, it's a 20-year-old membership-based 501c6. We have a C3 education arm as well, which is a nonprofit, donation charity organization. A C6 is a membership-based organization like a chamber. And we're here to work within the New Mexico and throughout the Southwest. I work with Dorian Rader, who has been on the board, who's one of the co-founders of this organization many years ago. She's part of 110 Capital, which used to be called NMA Ventures. And we have a grant from EDA, which is the Economic Development Agency, through the Department of Commerce federally. And we're supposed to be reaching out throughout the state. As you can imagine, that ends up being Albuquerque and Santa Fe often. We'd like to get beyond that, Farmington, Hobbs, Taos, and so forth. And so any efforts for us to bring in others to foster a more entrepreneurial community, to get New Mexico out of the bottom rankings, is something that we want to do. So what is this organization, New Mexico Angels? In 20 years, we've placed about $20 million investments seeking returns. That advances the local economy. It creates jobs. It also engages with entrepreneurs, creates mentorship, creates community. A new thing in what we're calling the new New Mexico Angels is in COVID, it got really hard to do what New Mexico is usually very good at, which is in-person meetings. And so we partnered with our colleagues to the north in Colorado with the Rockies Venture Club, because they had an established online platform. Rockies Venture Club is a national leading membership-based angel club. They do a lot of work with companies and entrepreneurs. They have a monthly pitch academy. They have a bunch of monthly trainings that are available to anyone. And we're very pleased to be partnering with them. And we've also taken some new programming with them. And our events are available at nmangels.com/events. Many of our events are open to others. People can come and join. You don't have to be a member. We want to foster interconnectivity. If we find that you're showing up a bit, we'll ask you to chip in to help with the organizing and the running and the cost. It's a membership-based organization. So examples of investing that we do is we foster investment opportunities. So companies will come to us through any number of channels, and you're welcome to refer companies. And then we can circulate those companies to others. Sometimes there is an investor with a very niche interest. For example, we had a young guy named Zeke Chavez. He has Champria, which is an esports platform. So it's kind of the platform for amateur esports teams to be able to find each other. And he came to us. We don't have expertise in esports, but we do had a couple members who like that stuff. And so we passed it around. He got some investors. Then when we did some introductions out of state to some other VC funds, and some of those conversations are going very well. So he joined as a member, as an entrepreneur. And by showing up at events, by him and I talking a few times, it's conceivable that he'll go from $200,000 to $1 million investment. So we're really pleased with his go-gettedness and the fact that he's got a good company that's a cutting edge. And so even if we don't fully understand it, there's other people we can build the web and make interconnectivity with. As an example of a company like Champriya, you know, they're growing, so they're going to need the accountants, they're going to need the fractional CFOs, they're going to need the marketing and the PR firms and things like that, which I think is the areas that Tan ends up operating. You know, he doesn't have Keyman life insurance. They probably don't have health insurance yet for their employees. So you can see where New Mexico Angels activities, towards Priscilla's question, starts to engage the TAN network and your membership. We need you. And there's a lot that you can do and offer to help a large number of companies just with the things that you do every day and the expertise that each of you has gathered by being a solid professional here in New Mexico. So other investing activities, people get involved. We have 50 portfolio companies. They need mentoring, they need Rolodex connections, they need portfolio assistance, you know, they need sales, they need value chain connections, those types of things. When we get a company that we're thinking about doing collaborative investment on as a group, there's a due diligence process. Some of you might have specific expertises in certain sectors or in certain skill sets, finance, accounting, IP, for example, where due diligence, having that specific tailored expertise can really help a team of people who are trying to collectively see if a company, through kicking the tires, is a reasonable entity for investment and what the risks might be. Then the New Mexico Angels, when we come together to collaboratively invest, we do that through what's called an SPV, or a special purpose vehicle. That's an LLC, or a registered legal entity, where we all invest together. And so one entity is then investing into a company. The reason why that's valuable is it helps reduce clutter on the cap table. So companies that may want to have future investment rounds, may want to go to a venture capitalist, the more we can kind of take our smaller checks and aggregate them, the easier it is for them to explain who their investors are, right? Instead of saying I have 15 angels, they all like different things and they've all invested from, you know, a few thousand to 100,000. We say we have one entity, it's a registered legal entity, and here's who they are. The other benefit of a special purpose vehicle is that if there's 10 of us, just to make up a number, and one of us doesn't want to invest in the next round, what's called follow-on, then the other 9 have the chance, the first crack at that proportional or pro rata amount of ownership. So if 10 of us join a company, it's a really good way for us to have first crack, first opportunity, and kind of a control, an aggregated voice. Historically, New Mexico Angels, our efforts have been relatively modest in helping startups. You know, typically we'll do about $200,000, which isn't a small amount of money, but in the world of venture and in the world of growth capital, it doesn't always get a company where it needs to go. And so what we'd like to do with the New Mexico Angels, and what we are doing now, is we're leveraging. So not only is it angel checks, but it's also partnerships with things like New Mexico Economic Development, helping to introduce lenders or government entities like New Mexico Finance Authority, liaising with city or county, and helping to identify opportunities that might help these startups. Let me give a pause there because I know I'm going a little quick, and see if we've got any questions in the chat, or if someone wants to unmute and ask a question or make a comment at this time.
We actually did have a question in the chat, Drew. The question is, when do it and what is the current accredited investor?
Kelly, you broke up for me at least.
Yeah, so I looked up the question here. So what is accredited? And thank you for that question. I'm going to make a little bit of dramatic tension here, and I will get to that in a couple bits. It's a federal term for the SEC, and I will answer that, and I thank you for that question. That's a really good one. Any other questions or comments at this point from the intro so far? Okay. To this idea of kind of the web or the network, which is something I really like about TAN. I've been attending events off and on for a few years now and really appreciate the Santa Fe events, the Santa Fe Business Incubator, and the other ones I've gone to, is that we have others participate, the veritable stone soup for those of you who went to camp or might have read the book to your kids. And the idea behind stone soup is, if we have some boiling water and everyone just brings the one thing that they're good at or the one thing that they already have at home, pretty soon you get a really good mix of different stuff that you might not have been anticipating. And those can have separate entities, your carrots, your onions, your zucchini, your spices. And so they stay separate, but they also start to mix a little bit. And so the idea of stone soup, I think, is a good one, particularly for New Mexico, where what we have is ways to connect. That was a skateboarder, in case you're wondering. This is not planned. So we have a number of sponsors who have joined in this vision of us all working together to help companies. And so I'd just like to call out Sunny 505 as a PR firm. They donate a lot of their time. They're willing to work with you and your companies. They've done really good things for us. One, Albuquerque and the city and their economic development department is working very hard on behalf of Porteños. I think they've done a really good job in COVID during really tough situations to try to help our small businesses, and they deserve to be commended. I think the mayor's office is really trying with the Toss No Mas, with the One Burke, and some of these other initiatives. And then the Feynman Center at Lanel is doing some great work, both to get ag tech and companies out of Lanel and then to allow companies to come. Let's see there. An example of some of our other sponsors, we have some great law firms who are very helpful to our startup companies because there's a deep area of expertise where if you do something wrong at the beginning, as many of you know, unraveling it or trying to fix it later can be a real headache. And I'm sure each of you has a war wound or a war story or something like that. So the lawyers, the accountants, the folks who are giving advice to the companies who are doing things every day are very important. And we're fortunate to have more than 25 sponsors who are all participating in growing our organization. So it's not a one-man show. This is a collective effort by a lot of people and a lot of organizations to see more people. So terminology. So just a little bit of jargon stuff. We talked about SPV, the special purpose vehicle. The ideal valuation, right? How much a company is actually worth if someone were to sell it. And there's pre-money and post-money. So if my company is worth 4 million and I'm raising $1 million, then afterwards my company's worth 5 million. So if I'm looking at shares, if I'm a corporation, or percentage ownership, if I'm an LLC or a partnership, we then can divvy up the pie and know what something's worth. I wouldn't get too overly worried about that, but I just like people to know some of the language because one of my experiences in the New Mexico startup scene in particular is we have a very strong disequilibrium of information, right? And so our entrepreneurs often get intimidated and there's class issues, there's capital issues, there's experience issues, there's rural versus urban, and we need to all work to be bridges so that the entrepreneurs with good ideas can accomplish what they're good at, which is being hard scrabble and really working. And they don't have to get impeded by, for example, if a banker is talking about NPV and cost debt service coverage ratio, and some of this language that's every day for them, but an entrepreneur doesn't understand. And so something that I think all of us can do as professionals helping businesses is that we can be sensitive to that and help to bring along our entrepreneurs and reduce the barriers, reduce the risk, and reduce the anxiety to help them along. So when we have something like a convertible note or a safe, hang on one second, or an equity offering, that we can demystify that for people. And then when we start talking about the stages of startup companies, whether someone's pre-seed or seed or series A, that's just a legal round of a capital happening. And then what I like to point out is FFF, friends, families, and fools, which is often our most important part of getting capital for another company, with an equal emphasis on all three of the F's, mine too. Let me go. So to that question before, accredited. So, none of us, I don't think on this call were alive during the Wall Street crash in the 1920s. But after that happened, you can imagine that our US Congress had to act because the financial markets were simply not serving human people, right? Literally, people were killing themselves because of what was happening on Wall Street. So the SEC was created at that time in the 30s, and they came up with this idea that you had to be basically rich enough to be able to lose your money, because that way you should either be smart enough to know better because you're a financial professional, or if someone's giving you snake oil, then you can pay for snake oil. And that the average American needs to be protected, or there needs to be regulations around investment offerings. So that's where the accredited investor came from. Basically, it's a millionaire, and it's measured in a certain fashion. If you're a household, that you earn 300,000. If you're single, that you're earning 200,000 a year. So, you know, our doctors, our lawyers. If you have net worth outside of your own home, stocks, bonds, a vacation home, an inherited home, a business, that type of thing. So that's what that means. I wouldn't get too hung up on it. Because with equity crowdfunding now and investment crowdfunding, there are ways that we can all legally invest in things kind of like the old days, based on trust, based on local initiatives, where there was this period in between where the government was trying to save us. So what are the elements of angeldom? Most angels are trying to earn a return, right? Sometimes businesses want people to give them money, and I don't give money. I make a due diligence assessment and I invest money. And when I invest money, I expect return. Now that can't be guaranteed, right? But understanding an entrepreneur, having an entrepreneur have aligned interest with me as an investor, and having the business be as far along towards potential success as possible are things that really interest me. You know, I decide if I've met an entrepreneur, if I'm gonna invest directly, because there's an opportunity, maybe they don't need that much money, maybe they already have some money and there's just a little bit left in the round, or whether I want to try to find others and we can collaborate, either for de-risking, you know, we each put in a little bit, or the due diligence collaborative effort I mentioned, or the SPV I mentioned. And then angel modern theory, finance theory, is that you don't make one investment. A diversified investment portfolio of a series of modest checks is what most angels do. So if you have a certain amount of money, let's say 100,000, that's a nice round number. The thought is you don't go find one thing, just as you wouldn't buy all Apple stock, although, you know, statistically Apple stock has done fine just well, but it's the reason why people do mutual funds, or the people used to pick stocks or have more than one, to diversify your risk and spread out the opportunity. So what does a typical angel deal look like? Usually, and there's always exceptions, we're either seed or very early. We're talking about a pre-money valuation below 5 million or low, single digits. You know, this is an early company. The company is raising a modest amount, which we define as less than $1 million. And then if, again, in my nice simple math example, if they have 4 million valuation, they're raising 1 million, then they're selling 20% of the company on a post-money valuation of 5 million, because it's 1 out of 5. And that the angels relationship is more than just writing a check. If a entrepreneur just wants the check and then wants you to go away, that's some red flags for me. It doesn't mean that I need to be active in every investment, but I'd like an entrepreneur to want to communicate with me, to know that they have things that they haven't figured out for themselves and are asking for advice or connections or Rolodex or expertise, and that we have a solid, trusting and transparent relationship. And then again, an angel check doesn't do any good if it doesn't earn a return. And for there to be a return, there has to be an exit. For those of you who owned houses during the heyday of, say, 08 through 10, right? You might have had a stomach churning moment when the bottom fell out of the market, and on paper, your house wasn't worth very much, or it was worth less than your mortgage, and you're upside down. Well, if you don't sell, you don't have an exit. That's kind of sucky and it's scary, but there's not an event. So luckily now, at least in Santa Fe and I think Albuquerque, the market's come back, and on paper, you're probably doing very well. And when I asked somebody about that, who's a neighbor of mine, they said, yeah, I could sell and make a lot of money, but then where the heck would I live? So that's another problem, right? Okay, another pause. Any questions or any comments we want to make at this point?
Diana, you had a question. Do you want to ask it? Diana?
I put it in the chat.
Okay. Do you want to ask? Do you want to ask it?
Oh, what type of is a specific type of business that you're looking for? And what is the minimum revenue for you to consider investing in a company?
Yeah.
I think you answered that last one.
Only tangentially, so I'm glad you asked it. So let me answer it specifically. We've got a lot more detail at newmexicoangels.com. There's a red button that says invest, and there's a whole page for entrepreneurs. Historically, the organization was very focused on tech and then technology coming out of the lab. So med tech, life sciences, biosciences, things like that. Given my experience with Meow Wolf, and I'd love to hear how people want to categorize what Meow Wolf is, right, from an investment sector. I want to look at what our local indigenous, meaning New Mexicans, not indigenous Native Americans, but our indigenous talent is and what they're putting forth. And do they have a good team? And so what I'm looking for, as it says here, is a solid management team. You know, if someone's a solopreneur and they've been fighting like heck to get their product in the marketplace, I think that's admirable. But I don't think that makes it a very well-rounded company. And it also creates risk, right? There's key man risk, there's expertise risk, there's personality risk. So we're looking for businesses that have a management team, that have a product that could scale, right? This is, I need to be able to make money if I'm writing a check. So family businesses or lifestyle businesses or LLCs are very important to our economy, but they might not be an angel investment. They might, but they might not be. So there has to be growth, there has to be increase, and then there has to be some sort of way for me to get a check back. And if it's not going IPO or doing an exit, then somebody has to be able to pay me back, or you have to envision going to a bank once you're bankable, or another investor is going to come along, or strategic partnership or something. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat, but you have to be thinking about it. And if you're not thinking about it, again, it's a red flag. It doesn't mean it's impossible. But you know, if you want my check to come into the company and you haven't told me how the check's going to come back out, hopefully with more money on top of it, I just don't know how to engage with you. And we can work on that together, going back to that thing about reducing barriers and reducing, you know, having expertise. An entrepreneur just might not have done that before. And then the barriers to entry piece, which is an important one. Is there a special sauce? Is there an unfair advantage that this company has that makes it different in the marketplace? In terms of the revenue question, we've been all over the place. We've done pre-revenue companies that are vaporware, or maybe they're seeking FDA approval, so they don't have their product in the marketplace yet. Obviously, you know, if I were to ask you, would you rather invest in a company that you haven't heard of, that doesn't have a product yet, or one that you've had their product and you've tried their product and you like their product? Which one are you more likely to be most comfortable with? So it's just a fact of life. You can do either, but one's a little easier than the other. Any other questions? The hydrogen economy. I'm not an expert at that. Certainly I'm supportive of it. Anything that diversifies us from oil and gas. Oil and gas is important to New Mexico, and it will continue to be, and it should be. But New Mexico also is in the top 10 in every other alternative fuel source. So why aren't we using that? And the idea of going to where there's more space for growth is always more valuable, rather than cash cow businesses that are going to run out of supply. So, you know, if I were to say to you, hey, do you want to put $1 into this industry that's been around for a while, and it's pretty much a safe bet, but you know, the trend line's basically going down and eventually there won't be any of this stuff left? Or would you rather do a really early company where they're just starting and the government is still in R&D phase, but basically the market's limitless? You know, which one's more attractive to you? So, you know, the idea of hydrogen and the potential there, I think sadly hydrogen has had kind of that same place in the R&D spectrum for about 10 years. So we haven't quite arrived at the station yet, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't start building it, and we shouldn't be building the tracks and the services when you do arrive at that station. So I think it's very exciting. There's a little bit of infrastructure and there's a little bit of science still to figure out in hydrogen, and that's about the extent of my hydrogen knowledge. So I think that's what I would say for hydrogen or any other new industry. I I was ambivalent about space. You know, we've got the spaceport, and the state spent a lot of money to make that thing attractive. But, you know, we're sending up rockets in this state now. And I just met 6 companies that are coming to New Mexico because of spaceport. So I'm a convert that this can be a cluster for us. And I think that there are other clusters that can be developed. I think our labs, regardless of what you think about the, you know, the militarization or the science behind those labs, they are billion-dollar companies in a state that only has one public traded company in the whole state. So we need these locuses of effort. You know, our universities are large commercial entities. And so we should be supporting them to have tech, to have employees, and to have ways that businesses can be doing that. Can someone paraphrase this comment for me? It's a little large for me to read while I'm trying to present. Kelly, you're on mute. You want to help me?
Is there a company out there working on plastic packaging for the chili industry?
I like the idea. I certainly love me some green chilies, and this time of year is great to hear the smell, right? I wish we could have that 12 months out of the year, that smell of our roasting chilies. I'm not familiar with one. If someone finds one or has a resource, feel free to put it on the chat and we can circulate it after the presentation.
Yeah, and the next question is, how do New Mexico companies compare with emerging companies in other states when it becomes to being attractive at exit?
Love that question. An idea just popped into my head for our chili person. If it's something that you're seeking, the places that occur to me, we should go to UNM Ingenuity's office hours, which we're partnered with, which happens every month, and some TAN folks have been part of that. It's not this Friday, but next Friday. You can find it on our website, and that's a great place to say, hey, I'm looking for something who can help me. If we're dealing with agricultural and manufacturing, I would go to our partners at the MEP, which is the Manufacturing Something Project, which is a state program with federal funding that helps our companies get into manufacturing and manufacturing innovations. Okay, the truck circle block. So that's what I would do for those of us looking at manufacturing and packaging. And then I think the USDA is a fantastic resource where there's tons of money for rural and ag-based efforts. There's a little bit of brain damage. And also our friends at the New Mexico Finance Authority are really good resources as well. So that's what occurs to me there.
I just put the link for New Mexico MEP in the chat.
Thank you so much.
They're great. They're a great organization.
So that question of how does New Mexico stack up against other states? You know, I'm not the best expert, so let me give you 2 quick data points and then some places that we can either find information together or we might explore. The New Mexico Chamber of Commerce did an excellent report and placed us in context of other states. And I'm really happy that state economic development subsidies and state programs ranks us about 17th or so. I might have the number a little bit off, but you know, we do a pretty good job of working as a community. And there are funds available to help subsidize or help address early stage issues for companies. And so that's something that should be looked at. New Mexico EDD, Go Biz New Mexico. That's a great website. And those folks I think are really hardworking for our state employees, and they really have my trust. And so I think there's that. And then in terms of exit, you know, the truth is that we don't have that much going on. So you can't really compare us to Silicon Valley because it would be like comparing Taos, New Mexico to New York City for the amount of entertainment you can do. You know, Taos does great fine. It's got some great stuff going on proportionally. And we do need exits. Exits beget more exits and exits get attention. There was one recently with a coal company called Twistle, Twistle. It's a social media medical company. They got bought out, but they've stayed here, and it's to their credit. We had Dion's Pizza and Boxing Bear chat with us because these guys are employing dozens, if not hundreds. Dion's is now employing hundreds of people, and it's a local homegrown talent. And I think, one moment. You know, I think Dion's is going to provide returns. It's privately held, by being able to buy out investors. So that's where the exit is going to come there by way of example. Okay. Other questions, Kelly?
I think that's it.
Okay. So do's and don'ts has been up here. I think most of you have been able to read it. I think some of it I hope is obvious. Things that might not be obvious is don't go barking up the wrong tree. Okay. Ask investors politely, not in a large room by yelling at them, but discreetly, what they like to invest in, how they usually work, how they prefer to engage, just as you would a bank. You know, you can't get a loan from a bank if you're a 6-month-old company with no assets, right? The bank just doesn't do that. An angel investor who invests in medical technologies isn't going to be as interested in your consumer product. You can still share it with them. You can ask them if they want to hear about it. They might be able to give you some advice. They might be able to give you some relationships or intros. But you know, you just got to go with logic, and you got to go with professionalism, and you got to ask questions. And if you don't know, it's fine. Ask. I just find that our entrepreneurs are so used to having to fight, you know, to having to scrap to kind of be successful, that sometimes they kind of go into sales mode, and they aren't going into relationship mode, and they aren't going into asking questions. And so those are some things that I have found that I think many of our entrepreneurs and many of us looking at angel investing can see improvement in. Skip to the next slide. Myths. We kind of touched on some of these, so I'm not going to go through them all. You know, you got to date. Those of us who are single and might be dating now, those of us who it's been a long time. But, you know, any business relationship has to be based on trust. It's not always parity, it's not always equal, but it's got to be a fit. And angel investing with businesses is the same way. Some national trends. This gets to the question that was asked. This is data that's a little old now, but the national trends on angel investments is 4 million pre-money. An angel group will do 250K as a group, and that in general, an angel check is about 10K. The type of investment, the legal format, the paperwork behind this, at an early stage is often a convertible note, which is legally debt, but the intention of it is to convert into equity at a later stage, preferred shares of equity, or what's called a safe note, which is an entrepreneur, basically IOU, which is thanks for the check. Here's a note, a piece of paper that identifies that you wrote me a check. We're going to kick the can down the road and kind of figure it out later. This is a very busy slide, but it's a good one. I should clean it up. So if anyone is a graphic designer and would like to do some trade, give me a touch, get in touch. This was done by Verge Fund, which is one of our local funds a few years ago. And the whole point of it is just to show the spaces, that there's different types of money to perform different purposes. And those purposes will depend on the amount of risk and how much return they're seeking. And as you see, the FFF round, the Friends, Family, and Fools, is usually early and smaller than angels and then on up. So I just want people to, again, identify where is the company that you're working with, what stage are they at in development, and what's a good fit for them. By the numbers, we've had a really good year this year. I think there was a lot of pent up demand with COVID and people really wanted to get active. We've actually helped 11 companies year to date, not all as a group. Sometimes it's just one angel writing one check. Champia, for example, that I mentioned before, we had 2 angels write checks from our community, although we introduced them to others. And thanks to Build with Robots and Taos Bakes and a couple of others, our total for the year is quite high. So we're really pleased by that. So the process, you can find it on our website. There's an online platform called GUST, G-U-S-T, which is free. And a lot of angel groups use it. So I don't like to make entrepreneurs jump through hoops, but it's a good one where if they do, it asks all the questions that someone would need. So it's a good way to help an entrepreneur go through the thinking of what's needed to engage with an investor. And then just for a sense of numbers, we look at 100 deals and we end up only really working with about 4 to 6 a year. So we're happy to support our local community, but it is a very sharp filter. And many times we're either giving people feedback for them to go back and work on something, or we're giving them a referral to an entity like West or Dream Spring or the Loan Fund, or we're helping them on their own path without writing a check. Some examples, I mentioned Taos Bakes. We helped them earlier this year. although they're very strong and are well on their way themselves. If you don't know them, go find them in Whole Foods and I think Walmart and Costco.
They're delicious.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah. And so
Love them.
the company. And then Meow Wolf, I'm assuming. That was a motorcycle. I'm assuming everybody knows them. And if you don't, go check out meowwolf.com or go to Denver or Las Vegas or Santa Fe. And let's see what else here. Where to find us online. I mentioned New Mexico Angels, Rockies Venture Club, the Angel Capital Association. Mike might have some resources for you. We really like our friends at the Tech Coast Angels in California. And then there's a couple of other niche groups that are doing some great work. In particular, I'd like to call out the Investors of Color Network. I think they're doing a fantastic job. And so if you have a BIPOC, a minority entrepreneur, there's a lot of more resources for them than there used to be. And so there may be ways for us to help them even more. And in a place like New Mexico, which is a third Native, a third Hispanic or Latinx, and then a third Caucasian, we should be championing all the things a part of New Mexico. Stop there, Kelly, for any questions, please.
I don't see any in the chat. Anybody else?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, thank you so much so far, very interesting presentation. Do you see a lot of interest in the emerging cannabis market here?
Yeah, certainly. And not just cannabis, but I think the fact that we had the hemp law change recently, CBD market is growing, and that we've had legal marijuana here and cannabis for a long time. The fact that you probably know more about it than I, that we're about to switch on the light of recreational. The challenge with cannabis is threefold. One is it's a bit of a gold rush. And so when there's so much churn, there's so much smoke, there's so much activity, it makes investors a little nervous to know which one to pick. And so often in that situation, instead of picking many, they pick none. So that's number one. Number two is some of the people who are really interested in cannabis, they're interested in it because they're high consumers of the product. And so they don't necessarily present a business case very thoughtfully or very completely, even though it's a high margin, high gross business that's going to be high growth. So a lot of times I've seen companies that don't have very compelling investment theses. The third problem is that we still have a regulatory environment, even though more than 50% of America now has access to recreational cannabis, that we still have the feds lagging, and they're going to lag for a number of years. And so those of us who are angel investors who have a portfolio or have risk or have to deal with tax issues at a federal level may choose to just avoid it because it's just not worth the hassle. Same thing with Bitcoin. Plenty of opportunity, plenty of ways to make money, plenty of ways to lose your shirt too. Did you want to follow up on the cannabis question?
No, thank you very much. I was just wondering because, as you say, the federal regulatory environment makes it difficult, particularly for banking. I mean, there's virtually no underwriting. And so if you don't have the cash and you need investors, I was thinking that maybe angel investing would be one vehicle people would turn to. But I see the challenges for sure that you outlined. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and they certainly should. And I'd also call out crowdfunding. And I also call out some of our local resources within the state that might understand the marketplace a little bit more. Yeah.
Drew, we have another question in the chat. It seems that several cities are very open to smaller businesses, but as they grow, they encounter barriers which cause them to leave. Is there an awareness of this and ways to make it possible for growing companies to remain?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I'd love us to have some dialogue on this, maybe after the chat goes. So maybe this is a great way for us to end and have conversation on it, and maybe people can unmute and chime in. I think there's 3 points that come to my mind. Number one was connectivity, right? And there's been a lot of work at the state level to provide connectivity to rural communities. I mentioned Quest before, and I mentioned them again. Taos Bakes is up there. I was up there a little bit. And the fact that now you can get high-speed internet makes a difference. So we can have our digital nomads. We can have people vacation to these places and still work. And then we can also have virtual companies. So the fact that the infrastructure in smaller communities can handle the needs of that company, whatever they are, whether it's water, whether it's electricity, whether it's cold storage, whatever that might be. So that's number one. Number two is I think COVID really advanced in New Mexico light years of virtual companies. And the idea that you can split, everything doesn't have to be in one place. But you still have to be able to find the things you need. Can you get your suppliers there? Can you source what you need? Can you get the talent? So that's problem number 2. And then problem number 3 is a supportive environment, whether that's your neighbors not running you out of town because they don't want cannabis next to the school. And I'm being facetious here, but you know, if the city of Santa Fe, where I live, and I'm very pleased with, the city has a reputation of not being business friendly. You know, hey, I just got here, I'm closing the door behind me. And I think Berkeley is doing a better job, as are some of our other communities, of helping a business person and an entrepreneur to be able to do their thing. If I can't get a permit, or if it's going to take me 6 months to make a change to my company, I just don't have the patience for that. Why should I stay? You should be writing me a check and giving me a tax break, just like you're doing to the big guys like Amazon and the film guys who are getting really sweet deals to come here. So that's a challenge, but I'd love to hear your challenges and thoughts. And in particular, what I'd really love us to focus on is let's not just kind of be negative at the problems. Let's look at what we can do together to create the solutions and the positive things to get the things that we want. And so I don't know if anyone's got 1 or 2 ideas there. Maybe I'll put Priscilla on the spot as my board member. She has to be supportive of these things, right? But if someone else has got one, please jump in.
Well, Drew, I was, this may not be answering your question exactly, but I have been planning to write you a note after this presentation that I think it would behoove us, the Angels, if this presentation was recorded and available with all the information that even people like me on the board aren't aware of. And because we're, you know, people that aren't part of Angels really have no idea. They think they know, but they really don't. And you give definitions that are important. And the more people see that, the more likely it is that you'll have more people involved.
Yeah, I love that, Priscilla. Thank you. So Kelly and I will take a look. If the sound quality is too bad, maybe I'll re-record or we'll look for another chance. The city of Santa Fe has a really good economic development guide, as does the state. And Priscilla, one of the things I heard from you is it's a lack of knowledge, right? If we had access to information, we can make more informed choices. And I think that's very powerful.
Drew, I've got a question for you. Does Angels do any kind of lobbying? Are you involved in state government at all? And the reason I ask that is you mentioned briefly about taxes, and that's a stumbling block for companies in this state. Are you able to do any work on that?
Yeah, Bob. So, you know, as a C6 nonprofit organization, I'm not allowed to lobby, so I need to say that. But there are 3 things which we are engaged with and connect with from an educational perspective. Number 1 is the state has a really good thing called the Angel Investment Tax Credit. And that provides basically a 25% off on investments. So if a company is raising investment and they have registered their security with the state, then if you write a check to them, you get 25 cents right back off your state taxes. So that's a really good thing. It's one of the national leaders. There's about 10, 15 other states that have that. And it's a little similar to the film tax credit, which you might have heard of, which New Mexico has done. And I think that's also important. So a tax credit's a good thing. 2 is we connect and we talk with New Mexico Economic Development. So we're in touch with our state economic government people, and they're very open. So if you have ideas, you can also go to them, and I think they're very receptive. And then number 3 is for us to work with our city folks to make sure that we've eliminated barriers to our entrepreneurs being able to get their business done. And so if you have ideas, we welcome them. We've got a 30-day session coming up this year, so it's not, it's harder to get stuff done, but there's going to be a lot of scrambling for COVID money. There's a lot of federal money coming through the state. So I think if TAN has some ideas, feel free to let us know. I'm not an expert at lobbying, but I'm happy to be part of a collective effort. And I'm also very happy to put us in touch with some of our elected officials who we've started to get to know, and they want solutions. So Bob, I think it's a very good point, and we just need to be thoughtful and educated of how we work together.
Right, okay, thank you.
Steve had a question.
Hey, Drew, I've raised over $100 million for oil and gas projects for many years, and what I've noticed is that the investors really aren't very sophisticated in understanding how dilution works as you go from one stage to the next. Could you discuss that for a bit?
Yeah, I think that's true. I need to get 30 seconds here. I've got a gentleman who really wants to talk to me, and so I'm going to move inside. Can I ask someone to start on the answer to that, and I'll be right back in 1 second.
Anybody have thoughts on dilution? The financial people in the world, in the meeting here?
Well, I can talk a little bit about it. What happens is that people put in money and wind up with a certain percentage of the company. So if the company's worth $1 million, you put in $10,000, you may have 1% of the company. But it's hard for that person to understand that when the next phase of financing occurs and people put in money, that your 1% is no longer 1% ownership of the company. It gets diluted in terms of your percentage ownership by future investments.
Mhm.
And it can be many stages of investment all the way through a public offering.
And so, Steve, the implication is that
You wind up owning a smaller piece of something that has greater value is the idea.
Mhm.
Yeah. Steve, that's a very good observation. We want to grow the pie. And sometimes people start to look at the wrong end of the horse. And what I mean by that is, I've invested, I now own 10% of the company, just for easy math. You come in and you invest, and suddenly you own 8%, and now I own 8%. And so I'm worried about the fact that I own less.
Mhm.
But what we're supposed to do by you coming in and investing is that the the pie is going to get bigger so we can grow. This happened with Meow Wolf, and it took a lot of education. So if you are growing the pie, it does work. If you aren't growing the pie, then it doesn't. The second thing Steve said, which I really agree with, is that sometimes our entrepreneurs put too much faith in our investors. And sometimes our investors haven't done the homework, or they don't want to do the homework, or they're lazy, or they just don't know the sector. And so it's FOMO, fear of missing out, or it's a herd mentality. And so I think that we here on this call should be professional folks who stand by our knowledge. I think we should help our entrepreneurs, and we should not always assume, because we know what happens when we make assumptions, that our investors aren't always going to be kind of this holy grail solution. Some are brilliant people. They really know their space, and then they're investing in what they know. I like to think that if someone came along with an experiential entertainment company after my 3 years at Meow Wolf, I'd have a couple of opinions and be able to ask some questions. Steve might be able to look at some oil and gas and have some ideas. But if someone comes to me with hydrogen, how do we know it's a good investment? That's the question we need to work on together.
Great. Any other questions for Drew? Okay. Well, we're coming up on the end of our time. Thank you so much, Drew, for this really fascinating presentation. I think everyone here learned a lot. There are resources still in the chat. And of course, the recording for this will be available in a couple of weeks. I've already shot a message to our TAN administrator to be aware of the sound quality in this. And if it's so terrible that no one is going to watch it, we'll go to plan B, whatever that is. So again, thank you so much, Drew, for the presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much to our guests who came today and who hung around. Everyone will get a link to this when it is posted, if it actually winds up being posted, including the guests. So go forth and conquer, everyone.